Hello, this is David Panush of the Edmund Burke School for another lecture from The Moral Animal by Robert Wright in the course Social Psychology. This time we're looking at Chapter 4, The Marriage Market. The question that we've got to sort of wrestle with in this chapter is the differences between monogamy and polygamy and why we see monogamy so often in human cultures as opposed to polygamy. And the first reason we sort of talk about in the book, Robert Wright talks about, is that monogamy by necessity. So what that means is that in most hunter-gatherer societies, which is a lot of the evolutionary environment in which we evolved, there really were not a lot of resources. So people lived moment to moment, day to day. They gathered as much food as they could or hunted for as much food as they could, and they didn't have a lot of resources. So there was no way really for one male to support more than one female and her family because he didn't have a lot. He couldn't accumulate any resources and didn't have a lot of wealth. So that's subsistence living, we call that, and that leads to monogamy by necessity. But as human beings develop, what we see more and more is economic stratification. We have wealthier and wealthier men, and then we see in a lot of societies if a male at the top could support more than one female, more than one family, then the question is why don't we see more polygamy? Because at this point we've got males with lots of wealth who could support more than one female, and so what we have then is socially imposed monogamy. That is, for some reason the society creates cultures, traditions, laws, religions that say you should not be polygamous. So let's talk a little bit about polygamy. When you've got a society in which males at the top can accumulate wealth, you start to see more polygamy, generally speaking. So we've got this drawing here, and you've got males on one side and females on the other side. And I've sort of showed you who pairs up with whom. And you can imagine each male represents sort of, thousands of males, or each female represents thousands of females. So we're not just talking about a single male or a single female, okay? So in this society, we've got males at the top with lots of wealth. And what we have is females, if they can, trying to marry up and get a mate together or raise a family together with the male at the top. So what happens is the male at the top monopolizes more than one female. Okay, so you can see next to the male, he's got a big happy grin on his face. He has more than one female. That's what being at the top has gotten him. All right, so what happens then? Well, if you think about it, every other female down the line is now marrying up. Because the male at the top occupies more than one female, all the females benefit because they all get to marry up. All right, so you can see the smiley faces for all the females down the side. Well, what happens to the males who aren't at the top? They are actually forced to quote-unquote marry down. They have less fit or less resource-rich females to choose from because the females that can are going to get chosen or monopolized by the male at the top. And you end up with males at the very bottom who may not be married at all. So all the males except for the ones at the top in this scenario are actually less happy or less well off or less evolutionarily advantaged. So couple questions you might ask. First, why are the females going with this male? Why would they enter into polygamy at all? And the answer might be, it may be better to get a part of an extremely wealthy male than to get all of a male who's not that well off. So if you've got a male, for the sake of argument, that has millions of dollars, and I am one of his wives, I can still get access to millions of dollars, whereas I marry a guy who makes $50,000, and I get all of him, but it's only $50,000. So that's one reason why you might see the females choosing polygamy. The other question you ask then is, what happens to these males who aren't married? And Robert Wright goes into some detail explaining what happens to males who aren't married. Alright, so Robert Wright goes into detail in the book about unmarried males. And what we know about unmarried males, generally speaking, is that they commit crimes, that they're violent, that they're dangerous, that they are agitated, that they're likely to get involved in rebellions and revolutions. So who has the most to lose if you have a lot of unmarried males around? And the answer is, the answer is males at the top of the hierarchy. So even though you might be the male at the top of the hierarchy and you might be monopolizing more than one female, if there's a lot of unmarried males, you might have a rebellion or revolution on your hand, and you might lose all of your well-earned or inherited wealth and status. So what we often end up with in most societies is monogamy by custom. That is, it's socially imposed through religion or law. And here we have the females sort of again, these might represent thousands of people, matching up with males of equal status if they can get them. Some people might move up a little bit, but in this situation, who benefits? Well, the higher status female still gets the higher status male, but now in this situation the lower status male is married, so he's a lot happier. And you might argue society as a whole benefits because now there's less of these unmarried males running around, killing and being violent and maybe raping or whatever they might, or starting revolutions or whatever they might be doing. So the whole society as a whole benefits, but individuals who may have previously, as a male at the top, might have previously been able to monopolize more than one female, or in fact almost all females who before would be able to marry up, they benefit from a more stable society, but they lose out in terms of being able to get together with a male of higher status as easily. All right, so what we often find, Wright talks about further in the chapter, is that in our culture what we have is, because you're not allowed to by law marry one person at a time, we have serial monogamy where a single male, and it's almost, I use the word polygyny because polygyny refers to where it's one male, many females. So technically polygamy could be one female, many males, but we just don't see that as often. So we talk about, in reality, it's polygyny, and it lurks under the surface. So you might have a male who doesn't even get married, and we know that the ages of wealthier, higher status men of getting married is going up and up, which means that they're spending their time in their 20s and 30s perhaps monopolizing the reproductive years of females who aren't getting married to other men. So that's sort of like polygamy, but they just do it one at a time. And then similarly, we might even find these men getting a divorce and remarrying another younger woman. So it's similar to polygamy because if you think about all those males and all those females we had matched up before, if I'm a man in my 20s or 30s, some of the females that I could have had a possibility of getting together with have essentially married up to a male who's older than me, and so they're out of my pool. And I'm not, and therefore you will have more males shut out, and you'll have more females being able to sort of marry up, because you've got this serial monogamy going on. The other piece of this is you might have more step families because you're going to have more people getting divorced, more people with fewer two-parent households. And when they remarry, you might have more step families. And there's some evidence, and the evidence is controversial, to show that in a minimal way, there's more, that there are negative outcomes for children raised not by their two biological parents. So again, we talk about how polygamy and polygyny isn't good for society as a whole. We've got more unmarried men who can't get mates and are getting married later. Maybe they're single longer, and that makes them, we know they're more likely to take risks and be violent, all these other things. And we've got kids who are being less and less raised by two biological parents, and that may have some negative consequences over time. The last idea in the chapter is sort of a general thing. It says, well, why, kind of talking about the idea that we have adapted, and when we adapted to strategies and behaviors that maximized our fitness in the evolutionary environment. So for instance, we love to eat sugar. And in the evolutionary environment, it was really important because if we didn't love to eat sugar, we might not have gotten enough sugar to survive. But then our society is so different than the one that we evolved in. We still have the adaptation. We still have the feeling of loving sugar. But today, it does not actually maximize our fitness. It actually might make us diabetic, or give us heart disease and kill us. So we might say, well, that's not a very strong, a very evolutionarily advantageous behavior, eating all the sugar. It's not right now, but it was in the environment in which we evolved. So when we think about behaviors, we might get confused sometimes because we say, well, that doesn't maximize our fitness. Like using contraception, it doesn't maximize our fitness. But the behavior of wanting to have sex goes back because it obviously was useful in the evolutionary environment. So that's what we need to just as an intellectual exercise, we need to say when we see a behavior and we say that's odd, it doesn't seem to maximize fitness today, we have to ask, but did it maximize fitness back then in the evolutionary environment? All right, so if you have questions, please get in touch with me. As always, I strongly encourage you to read the book and do the notes and let me know if I can help you.